And Lawson, we're going to be talking about parenting today, particularly how parenting styles affect childhood anxiety. So I'm actually really looking forward. We're going to have Maria Andrioli. She's a registered psychologist. She sees children, teenagers, family, and work with anxiety, trauma, neurodiversity, and behavioral challenges. She's also married to a pastor, and they have together 3 kids, and she loves painting and reading. Maria, thank you so much for joining us for the breakfast show. We're looking forward to learn more about this fascinating topic about different parenting styles and how they may affect childhood anxiety.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited to be on. First time on the show, so yeah, looking forward to it.
That's great. So, Maria, can you please help us by starting? Okay, what are the most common different parenting styles that you see out there?
Yeah, so there's these kind of like 4 main parenting styles in the research. So we've got our authoritarian parenting style. This is like your typical very like strict, controlling parenting, very rigid rules, lots of like punishment. And, we see that kids growing up in this type of home usually really suppress their emotions, can become quite self-critical, prone to anxiety. Then we've got this very permissive parenting style, which is very warm, but there's very little rules. Parents usually really avoid conflict here, and rules can be pretty unclear. They change pretty often, and kids grow up feeling that things are pretty unpredictable, that is, which can lead to anxiety as well. We've got this style called neglectful, which means it's like low warmth, low structure, just overall lots of very kind of like distant parenting. Again, this style leads to anxiety. And then finally, we've got this 4th one, which doesn't tend to lead to anxiety as much in kids, which is called authoritative. So there's clear boundaries here. There are rules, but there's also a lot of warmth and understanding, right? And this is the biggest kind of protection against anxiety.
So when we're talking about childhood anxiety, what are we talking about? So how do children display anxiety? How do we know if our children are anxious or not? What are the symptoms?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because kids actually show anxiety pretty different to adults. Like for us, when we're anxious, we definitely might really show our anxiety in ways that are really obvious, but kids don't usually, especially younger kids, don't usually know how to like verbalize what it is that they're feeling inside. So a kid who's anxious might be a kid who's getting lots of tummy aches, complaining a lot of tummy aches, not wanting to, say, go to school in the morning or go to daycare, struggling a lot with like separating from their parents. Could be a kid who's having nightmares, getting pretty like worried around bedtime. But sometimes even kids who start having like a lot of behavioral challenges or just, very defiant, saying no a lot, not wanting to try new things, do new things, are actually really just kids who have anxiety. So definitely shows up different in kids than it does in adults.
I see. And I think that from what I'm hearing from you, what you're saying is that it's kind of the frequency where these things happen, because children may have, the occasional nightmare here and there. They might have, a bit of a defiant attitude or so on. But But when you talk about anxiety, is when you see that this kind of behavior is increasing or is becoming unsustainable. Is that right, or is that?
No, you're absolutely right. Like we definitely don't want to pathologize just like normal kid behavior. Like kids, it's actually, just that healthy level of stranger danger, that healthy level of anxiety. It's when it gets to the point where it's actually just stopping them from living, their normal day-to-day life. Like they're just not getting sleep, or they're just not eating, or they're not able to just go along with their like everyday routine. And it's really affecting them. This is when it starts to become a problem. But you're absolutely right. There is this normal and healthy level of worry that any child or just any human will experience.
Okay. So how can we become more balanced parents? So let's say, for example, that if I'm a parent, that I tend towards more of an authoritarian style with, more rigidity and rules and boundaries. What are some of the things that I can do to make, to perhaps maybe soften it up or become wiser in how to administer that discipline?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I actually like something that you shared earlier on the show, and you said that the best parents are the ones who've never had kids.
Yeah.
Because I think the reality is that as parents we often get it wrong. And I'm a mom and I've definitely gotten wrong so many times myself. Even knowing these things, we still tend to get it wrong.
Can relate. Lawson, by the way, he's writing a book and offering free parenting advice for everybody who
you're
wants.
actually in the presence of the greatest of all time parent, and which is myself, by the way.
And he hasn't had kids yet, but he has all the answers.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's very challenging. It's so complex, isn't it? I remember there is actually, when you look at the Bible, sometimes people back in the days, they were having children after they were like 100 years old. Like I'm talking about the beginning of Genesis. Like people were having their first child at like the age of 150. And sometimes I wish, man, I could do it some more, with a century of experience before having children. Because it can be quite daunting and complex. And, it's not a trivial task.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It is daunting, and it would be nice to have 100 years experience in your belt. But at the same time, like kids don't need perfect parents, just, parents who are willing to grow and willing to be present for them. You said, what do you do if you're this kind of more authoritarian parent, who's this quite, strict or, controlling parent? I would say the first thing is to just kind of, this is the answer to everything, right? It's just to be aware. Just to know this information, to be aware, to kind of be able to self-reflect on your own parenting. Because the thing is, I think most parents generally do want what's best for their kids. We do want to do the absolute best by them. But it's just good to know that when we try to be overly strict and a lot of punishment, and there's not a lot of kind of like validation of emotions when we get some problems. So there's this strategy that we're using more and more in psychology. You may be familiar with the term or you may not be, but it's called emotion coaching.
Oh, I haven't heard about it. Tell me what it is. I'm curious.
Oh, you haven't? Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So emotion coaching. So one of the most powerful things we can do as parents is not to stop our kids from feeling big feelings, not to either try to take it away from them or try to just make them move on from it, but to actually sit with them in those emotions, and not to sit in those emotions for the sake of let's just dwell on all your worries for a really long time, but for the purpose of, talking through it and guiding them forward. And how we do this will obviously change based on how old those kids are. But either way, those kind of, principles are still important. So emotion coaching is noticing and validating your child's feelings, giving them the space to experience them, but also gently guiding them towards a next step, right? So we've got these 5 steps of emotion coaching. The first step is to, really just get in tune with noticing your child, right? There may be times when you think your child is misbehaving. They're just being naughty. They're just being defiant. They're getting on your nerves, which I think a lot of authoritarian parents tend to have these beliefs that their kid's just trying to annoy them, right? Mm-hmm. Not always, but it can be the case, or they're just not listening. They're just, they're just disobeying. But I think to be able to stop, pause, notice your child, notice what could be going on for them, are they shaky? Is their voice shaky? Are there tears? Have they had a big day? So just pausing and taking time to notice them and what else could be going on in their world. And the next step for emotion coaching is to name and validate those emotions, right? I think even as adults, just think of when you're telling someone that you're struggling and they just don't really validate what's going on, how frustrating and alone that can be, let alone what it must feel like for a child. So just a simple, I can see you're feeling worried right now. I guess it could be because this happened. That makes a lot of sense, Mm-hmm. And then the third step is to remain calm yourself, to model what calm looks like, right? When we show that we are calm. You're right. No, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. And it depends on the situation, right? But look, think of it this way. Imagine you're on a plane, right? And you're riding the plane and the flight starts to get shaky. Yeah. you're probably going to start feeling a little bit anxious. I know I do. I absolutely hate flying. So this flight's getting shaky. I'm getting nervous. And then the pilot's voice comes through, on the plane, and he's freaking out as well, right? You can imagine how you would feel at that point in time.
Yeah.
So it's the same. Like, we are the pilot on the plane for our kids. We're the ones who's driving the plane. So when we freak out, when we panic, you can imagine, how well they're going to be able to cope with their emotions. But you're right. It's really difficult. And again, there's no perfect parents, but it just shows how important it is that we, look after ourselves as parents, help ourselves take the steps we need to take to be in a good headspace, because it really impacts, our little ones. So that third step is, trying to stay calm. And that may be a matter of trying to find those strategies for us personally as parents to stay calm. So first steps, notice our child, notice what could be going on for them. Second step, name and validate their emotions. Third step, model calm. And fourth step, once, the idea is when we remain calm, eventually they will come and match our emotions, because that's what kids do. They follow us. They match our emotions once they're calm. And it may sometimes be very fast, and it may sometimes take a bit longer. Then we will coach a step forward. This is when we're encouraging one small action, one next step to encourage them forward. So if they're anxious about something specifically, it could be a small step they take in facing that. Right? And then finally, just staying present with them, not rescuing them from whatever they're scared of, but staying present with them as we guide them into doing that next step.
Very interesting. And what about if you are perhaps more on the side of being permissive? And, what problems can arise from that? And how can you help children manage their behavior better through if you tend to be more on the permissive side of things?
Yeah. So permissive parents can be very loving, right? But also very conflict avoidant. Because we're talking about anxiety. In the context of anxiety, a permissive parent may kind of almost jump in and tend to rescue their kids, right? Tend to remove challenges to avoid, their kids from getting anxious. They may have a tendency to just not really hold up as many rules, especially if rules are stressing for the kid or the kid is stressed out by these rules. So there's a kind of lack of boundaries and a kind of almost at times, protecting kids from doing things because it's maybe, affecting them. So they're very warm parents, but very few rules, very few boundaries. So kids will definitely grow up feeling loved, but can also feel quite uncertain. The thing is kids actually might hate rules in the moment, but they actually crave clear boundaries.
That is very, sorry, Maria, we have about 30 seconds left. And but this is so interesting, I think so fascinating for the topic. We definitely need to have a part 2 of that conversation here.
Yeah, for sure.
But just to summarize
Absolutely.
here, if you could give a 30-second summary, what would be the top tips that you could give based on our conversation today?
Yeah, so I think, just remembering that love without limits creates uncertainty. Limits without love creates fear, but the balance of both gives kids courage. We can give our kids courage by teaching them emotion, by using emotion coaching. This is being a coach for our kids' emotion, and we do this by noticing what emotions they're feeling, naming and validating those emotions, remaining calm, but then encouraging our kids to take a step forward in the direction of their anxiety, not away from it.
That's wonderful. Maria, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge or experience with us as a psychologist. We're looking forward to have you again with us and to continue that conversation on parenting.